All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. And all right, man, so Terence Crawford, in this video, we're gonna talk about Terence Crawford saying that he wants to be the IBF mandatory, and also the fact that Terence Crawford may have Errol Spence Jr. may have a very difficult fight for his next fight as the IBF mandatory. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. In this video, we're going to talk about the lightweight champions. But before we do, make sure that you go check out my betting partner, bsur.com/Fanon, where you can get really good values for your gambling dollar. Make sure you check it out. The link is in the description. Also, before we get into the video, make sure you hit the like, share, subscribe. All of those good things would be greatly, greatly appreciated. All right, man. So big event last night in the welterweight division. Curtidillo Abu Karev lost to Cody Crowley and is no longer the IBF mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. It's not been named officially, but coming off a loss, you typically lose that IBF mandatory status. And so it seems as if they, with the IBF mandatory coming up due, that they will be looking within their top three to order a fight for Errol Spence Jr. And more than likely that is going to either be Vergil Ortiz, who's number 3, or Jaron Ennis, that's number 2, or whoever they elevate up into that position for the IBF. So there's definitely a shift in who Errol Spence Jr.'s purported or most likely next opponent is going to be. Either Vergil Ortiz or Jaron Ennis are really, really big fights for Errol Spence Jr. and very dangerous fights. But also, in a strange manner, Terence Crawford also throws his name in the hat and says that he wants to fight Errol Spence Jr. as the IBF mandatory. So let's talk about that really quick. First of all, that's not going to happen for Terence Crawford. Terence Crawford is not going to be the IBF mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. It's not even possible. According to what the WBO said and Paco Vacarso said just a couple months ago, just about a month ago, when the same issue came up with Terence Crawford petitioning the WBC to become the WBC mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. There was a guy that stood up. It was on tape on Ellie Sethback's channel and ES News. And they said, hey, I'm a representative of Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford would like to be named the WBC mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. And the response from the WBC was, well, we need to get that from a promoter, and they blew that off for the minute. And then right then they kind of just put that to the side. And then after that, Paco Vacarso jumps out and says, hey, no go, because it's not legal from a legal standpoint. One organization cannot order its champion to fight a champion of another organization. And the logic behind that is that when you are ordering a fight, in order to order a fight, the sanctioning body has to have authority over both guys. He has to have the authority to order their champion and also has to have the authority to order the other champion. And that's just not the case because like, for example, with the WBO and the IBF, Errol Spence Jr., right? The WBO cannot order Errol Spence Jr. to do anything because he's not the WBO champion. And their bylaws, their rules, and the arrangement that they have with Terence Crawford, all of those things are related to the fact that he is carrying that belt and has all the rights and the privileges associated with being the WBO champion, right? That is not the case with somebody that is fighting outside of their organization, outside of their ranking system, right, and all of that. So the WBO president himself said that could not take place. So that most likely cannot take place for Errol Spence, related to the IBF and the WBO either. And then there's also the issue that you have where, just the obvious issue. How are you going to work out that purse split? Now, there's a lot of Terence Crawford fans who want to keep ignoring this purse split, but it's something that was talked about by a major complaint of Terence Crawford, which is why I'm saying I don't know how seriously you can take this stuff, because Terence Crawford is saying, they make me the mandatory. Well, if they were able to make him the mandatory, the split for the IBF for a championship versus a mandatory guy is 65-35, which is lower than the 60-40 that Errol Spence Jr. had said at a point in time he would be willing to do. And it's definitely not 50-50. So if they mandate it, they would have to go into a negotiation. If they go into a negotiation and they can't come up with an acceptable agreement, right? Like Errol doesn't agree to 50-50, then they go to a purse bid. Then they go to the purse bid, then whoever wins it, they have to give Errol Spence Jr. 65%, and they got to give Terence Crawford 35%. So more than likely not going to happen just off that alone. And it would just make a lot more sense if Terence Crawford would say, hey man, I'll take the 40%, or maybe try to negotiate to, 55-45, something like that with Errol Spence. But it is interesting that Terence Crawford has now done that 2 times, once with the WBC and now at least out on Twitter with the IBF. Because, it's clear that he keeps talking about that fight. However, I'm telling you right now, man, that Errol Spence Jr. more than likely is going to have to fight his mandatory next. And it's going to be really, because the IBF, I don't believe that, and I did a video about this before, with the IBF mandatory, he's not defended that IBF mandatory since 2018. So the question is, with the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr., will it be Virgil Ortiz, who's number 3? Will it be Jaron Ennis, that's number 2? You would suspect that it would be the guy that's the higher ranked guy, but that's not always how it goes. There's been times when somebody, because I think it's I don't even know if it says in their rule the highest ranked available guy, but Jaron Ennis said that he's ready for a championship shot next. Virgil Ortiz says that he's ready for a championship fight next, and so it's probably going to be one of the 2 of them. Also, but I do believe also that this guy Cody Crowley, who beat the number 1, there's a chance that the IBF may mandate him. May say, okay, he's now the number 1 ranked guy because he beat the number 1 ranked guy. I'm not sure if that's how that works, right? Because right now I looked at his IBF rankings and I didn't see for November. I don't see him ranked inside the top 10. You've got Jaron Ennis, Virgil Ortiz, Conor Benn, and David Ivanestein. You also have Conor Benn, who just won last night, whose ranking may go up depending on whatever they do. But the good thing for guys like Jaron Ennis and Virgil Ortiz, who may be looking forward, to having that fight with Errol Spence, is that the IBF typically does not play games. And they are very. I think that they have to be considered the most fair of all of the sanctioning bodies. So it's going to be interesting, man. That's going to be a tough mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. But I favor him over both guys. Jaron Ennis, man, is definitely a superstar. Very, very difficult, right? Guy, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see whether or not Showtime and whether or not those guys push Jaron Ennis this early into a fight with Errol Spence Jr. He says he's ready to go, and it very well may be the case that he becomes a mandatory. However, before you actually know who's going to be the mandatory, they're going to have to name that mandatory. Doesn't just come off of who's ranked the most highly. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section, and with that, I'm out. Peace.